9, welcome back to your next living room lessons. Obviously, we've spent the first two beginning our look at this retail topic, the first part of your GCSE. As I said, it's quite a small topic, so there's only 4 in total. So this is number 3 of 4. And we're going to be looking at something a little bit different today. Last lesson we were looking at online retail, and today we're going to be having a look at a bit of some of the impacts of things like online retail and other things. So what you're going to need in your books today is What you're going to need is your exercise books, a pen and a ruler, and your phone. So make sure you've got all those bits and we will get started. But as per usual, we are going to be doing our little jog your memory. So 3 questions on the board. These are our most recent stuff. So give a social benefit of online retail. So what is a good thing for people, the social side of online retail. Give a disadvantage of out-of-town retail parks. And then we're going way back to stuff you were doing at the beginning of your extreme events topic. And this stuff is actually useful. We do need this. Obviously, we will come back to this in the GCSE towards the end of year 10. But I want to see if you can remember what kind of air pressure causes a tropical storm. All right. So pause your phones, scan the QR code or copy the link out and go have a go at this jog your memory for me. Okay, so what we are moving on to today, as I say, is one of the kind of problems with online retail and other things is something called death of the high street. So we're going to be having a look at vacancy rates and how they're changing on high streets. We're going to be having a look at the impacts of death of the high street and think about how town planners can start to improve the high streets. All right, so if you could write this title in for me, Death of the High Street. Sounds ominous, I know. Write it in, underline it with a ruler, and we will get started in a minute. Let's start now. All right, so first thing I want us to have a look at is on the board is a bar graph which has got the vacancy rates for 3 different types of retail. By vacancy rates, I mean the number of empty shops. So shop units that have got nothing in them, that they've closed down and it's remained empty. So what we've got is town centre. So these are shops in and around the town centre. And we've got retail parks, so your out of town retail parks like Asda, Hollandbury. And then we've got shopping centres, so places like Churchill Square. So the first thing I'd like you to do is have a go at these 2 questions in your books. So the first question is compare vacancy rates across the 3 locations. So it's basically asking you to describe this graph but compare our 3 different locations. So which has got the highest amount, which has got the lowest amount, and maybe give a bit of data. And then the second question is, can you suggest why they vary so much? So why do you think that those that have got a higher amount of vacancy rates might have a higher amount than the ones with a lower vacancy rate? So you might want to go back and have a look at your advantages and disadvantages of these different types of retail to start to pick out why some might have higher rates, some might have lower rates. Please answer these in full sentences, okay? Don't just write notes. So pause your phones in a moment and you will have the graph and these 2 questions and we can have a go at these in your books. Right, let's quickly go through these 2 questions. So, as we can see, shopping centres have got the highest vacancy rates. The highest percentage of units are empty in shopping centres, with a vacancy rate of just under 15%, whereas the lowest vacancy rate is in retail parks at just above 6%. So we can see the differences. Shopping centres, so places like Churchill Square, have got more empty units than places like retail parks. The town centre also has a fairly high number, but it's our middle ground, all right? So reasons why this might be is that in your shopping centres and in your town centre, the rent is going to be considerably higher. So it's going to cost a lot more for the different retail outlets to rent out those units. So that is why we often find retail parks are going to have less empty space, because large, normally chain shops are able to rent a large space for less money than a smaller space in a town centre. So that's why we would expect there to be higher vacancy rates in the town centres. Now we're going to take this a little bit further and we're going to have a go at an exam question that came up a few years ago. Now this is a typical exam question in the new style GCSE where they might give you some way of displaying data, a diagram or a figure, and they will ask you to do something with it, and then they will ask you how you might improve this diagram. So what I'd like to do, so what it says here, the students used a different transept in another shopping street. They collected data about the types of shops and services on each side of the street. The results are shown in diagram 1.2. The first question is calculate the percentage of shops that are vacant. Show you're working in the space below. So yes, there is always a little bit of maths in geography GCSE. You will have to do a little bit of maths, but it's nothing too challenging. We ain't doing no algebra or trigonometry or any of that. And then the second question is suggest 2 ways that this diagram can be improved. So in a moment, I'd like you to pause your screens again, and I'd like you to have a go at A, working out the percentage, and B, telling me how this graph could be made better. I will quickly talk you through how to do your percentages, so all you need to do is do it, all right? So you need to count up how many units there are in total. So once you've added up how many units there are in total, you then need to count how many vacant units there are, and then you divide the vacant units by the total number, and you times it by 100, and that will give you your percentage, okay? So pause your phones, work out your percentage, and have a go at this question here. How might this diagram be made better? Think about how we could make it clearer, how we might be able to group and categorise, how we might be able to add colour to it, all right? What's missing from this diagram? Pause your phones now and have a go at that. Okay, so let's have a go at these together. So as we can see, hopefully you've worked out, there were 20 units in total. All right, so there were 20 units, and there were 3 were vacant. So we are going to divide 3 by 20, which equals 0.15, and then times it by 100 equals 15%. Hopefully you all got that. So the vacancy rate on this high street is 15%. 15% of the shops are empty. Now, ways that we might be able to improve this graph. So we could start by adding colour. So we might maybe group some of our different shops and services together. So we could, for example, group together our baker, our newsagent, our baker and newsagent. We could group together and say that they are food. We could group together the charity shop. We could group together that with the clothing shop. And we could say that, and the jeweler shop, and we could say that they are clothing shops. We could put together the coffee shops and the restaurants, and we could say that they are takeaway food outlets. You could start to group them together, and then you might be able to see, if you did a different colour for each different category, you might then be able to start to see which of our different types of retail there are more of, and what you would expect to see more of on a high street. You might also notice that there is no north arrow or no scale or anything on here, so we could make the graph more accurate by putting a scale on or putting a north line on, all right? So we're going to come on to the main part of this lesson is. So we've also spoken about the fact there are quite high vacancy rates. And this, as I say, is something that we call death of the high street. As more and more people are doing their shopping online, it's led to high streets not being able to have the same amount of footfall and have the same amount of customers. So we can see here 5 shops that have recently, in the last kind of 10 years, big high street chains that are no longer on the high street. So we've got HMV, although randomly the one in Brighton is still open. They're shut everywhere in the country, I don't get that. HMV, Blockbuster, BHS, Comet, Macklin. It's happening all the time. There are lots and lots of shops on our British high streets that are currently closing down. So during 2015, 1 in 8 shops were empty at some point on a high street. There are more empty shops in the north of the UK than the south, and then this one blows my mind a little bit. So the total number of empty shops in the UK could create 5 city centres the size of Manchester. So the total number of shops could create 5 Manchester town centres. If any of you have been to Manchester before, it's huge, okay? So therefore the high street is quite a problem. So what I would like you to do is, in a moment, pause your screens, and I want you to have a go at watching this video for me. So this video is explaining a little bit more about why it's happened and what some of the solutions and what some of the changes are on British high street. So pause the video, scan the QR code or type the link out and just watch this video for now so you can start to get a bit of an idea. Okay, so what I would like you to do now is have a go at this gap fill, which links quite directly to the video. So you can start to get a bit of a definition of death of the high street and some of the things high streets are having to do. So if you could copy out this gap fill for me, and then at the bottom there are the words that you need to fill in, okay? So pause your phones, copy this out and write in the correct terms for me and we will go through them in a moment. All right, let's go through our answers on this then. So, death of the high street is the rapid closure of stores on British high streets, leading to a decline in footfall. Online shopping is a leading cause of this as consumers prefer the ease of it. This has begun a change to outlets offering an experience such as cafes, tattoo shops and e-cigarette shops. Okay, so as that video explained, as more and more shops are having to close, high streets are adjusting and changing, and we're finding that there are more and more of these shops where you have an experience where you can't necessarily buy the product online because you need to be able to feel it or taste it or see it. So the high street is changing. I know, as I've probably told you before, I live near London Road in Brighton, and I've lived here for 3.5 years now. And I found that over the last 3.5 years, the change on that high street has been huge. In the last few months, Co-op and Boots have closed down, two big shops. But what we're starting to get lots of is there's loads of nail salons, there's loads of hair salons, there are lots of e-cigarette shops, and there are lots and lots of cafes and pubs. So whilst these are all quite great experience shops to have near you, it has meant that a lot of the kind of normal retail shops which have had to move more online are not able to sustain being on that high street anymore. And this is common across lots and lots of the UK. So what I want you to have a go at next is having a think about the reasons why this is happening, the reasons why people are not shopping on the high street as much and why they're moving towards doing more of their shopping online and why high streets are suddenly declining. So what I would like you to do is there are 6 reasons. No? 5 reasons. I can't count. There are 5 reasons here for you. And what I'd like to do is make a copy of this diamond. I say 6, but there's 5. A diamond 5, and I want you to rank them in terms of the reason you think is the most likely, the most significant reason why high streets are closing down. And I'd like you to put the reason at the top that you think is the most important and the reason at the bottom that you think is the least important. There is no right or wrong answer on this. This is just down to your opinion. So have a read through these 5 reasons and rank them. Which one do you think is the most significant? Which one do you think is the least significant? All right, so pause your phones now and have a go at this. Okay, so as you know, to add to those impacts, those reasons why, we're obviously in very unprecedented times at the moment. That word is, oh, why did I just say that? Unprecedented is all you're blooming here on the radio and on the news at the moment. I'm fed up of it, but we are in unprecedented times. And because of what's been going on with coronavirus, high streets are suffering even more. As we know, there are loads and loads of, well, all shops have had to close, unless they're selling essential goods, which has meant that there are lots of shops that really are at risk of closing down. So even in the last couple of weeks, Debenhams, huge retailer, massive department store across the whole UK, but they have been struggling for a few years now. They've announced that they're going into administration and that they are going to be closing down. So this is another big high street giant that's being closed down. And there are obviously, one of the main reasons for this is because of the coronavirus pandemic. So yes, you've got those 5 reasons, but there's also extra things going on in the world right now. You never know what's going to kind of happen to the economy, and you never know what's going to happen in global affairs, and that can have an impact on the high street. So what I want us to have a think about next are the effects. So what are the problems with high streets closing down? There is a fly flying around here. I hope that's not too annoying for you, it's annoying me. So what I want you to do, we've got a diagram here which shows you the kind of how one impact might lead to another, which might lead to another effect, all right? And what I'd like to do is I'd like to pause your phones in a bit and have a look at this diagram. And I want you to answer these 3 questions. So by the end of it, you will have written down 4 different effects. So one of them will be an economic effect, so an impact on the economy of the area. So that could be to do with employment, that could be to do with money and taxes, etc. And then I want you to do a social effect. So what might happen to the people? What impacts is this going to have on the local community? And then I want you to have a think about these 2 here. So what effects do shops closing have on the local environment? So what's going to happen to the physical environment of these high streets? Now, when we say environment, we don't always mean natural environment. You don't always need to be talking about greenery and lakes. It can be the kind of built environment. So what's going to be the impact on the built environment in this area? What's that area going to look like? And what impact will it have on the footfall of an area? So what's going to happen to the footfall, the number of people on that high street? So pause your phones, and then at the end, you should have 4 effects written down. You might want to do a little title, a subtitle that says effects, and then have 4 bullet points, 1 economic, 1 social, 1 that's an impact on the local environment, and 1 that's an impact on footfall. Okay, off you go. Let's talk through these then. So we will start off, one of the economic effects, we could have less money is spent in the remaining shops, or we could have that the local authority has less money to spend improving the area. Social effects could be that people choose to shop in another town, which means that they're going to have to spend more time if they're driving to a town that's not very close to them. Could also mean there's less choice for the consumers, so there's less for people to choose between. Effects on the local environment with these 2 here, so there's lots of derelict buildings, they can become vandalised, which means that the retail area then has a very poor quality, so it starts to look run down. This can also then lead to there being an increase in crime, because if you've got lots of quiet high streets and empty buildings, you're more likely to have crime occurring. And in terms of footfall in the area, it means that there's less footfall, there's less people. If there is a high street where 50% of the shops are closed, people are more likely to drive to a high street where there's more shops that are open, meaning there's going to be less footfall, which then knocks on. So if there's less footfall on a high street, that means there are going to be more shops that can't make any more money, which means more shops will close down, which means that it knocks on and has a knock-on impact on the local government and on the natural environment, the built environment, all right? So because of this, high streets have had to really kind of think about how they can fight back, how they can improve their high streets to make sure that people start going back to them. We can see this going on in Burgess Hill at the moment. Burgess Hill is having a huge amount of money thrown into its local area, into the Martlet Centre, into all of the areas surrounding it, to try and encourage shoppers to use this space again. So there are lots of different strategies that can be used to improve it. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at a few. So here is an image of a high street, and on here we have got 9 different impacts. So we've got reducing the cost of short stay parking, adding trees, street entertainment such as buskers, creating 3 park and ride schemes, pedestrianised streets, pop-up shops that sell short-term out of the vacant shops, having bike racks, having benches, having special events such as a French, a Christmas, a German market, and having lots of signs. So what I would like you to do in your books is just choose 4 of these, and I'd like you to write them out and explain how they encourage shoppers to come back to the high street, how it encourages people to come and use this area again, all right? So have a look at these 9, choose just 4 of them, and write them out and explain how they encourage shoppers back to the area. Right, I'm just going to talk through a couple of these. I'm not going to do all of them. So, benches makes this shopping area more accessible to different groups of people. It means that elderly people, it means that disabled people are more able to access this high street because they know that there's going to be points for them to stop. I don't know about you, but whenever my grandma goes shopping and I'll have a chat with her the next day, she loves to tell me about how she went maybe just to car factories, buy a card and get a bunch of flowers or something. And she's been out for like 5 hours because she goes from one shop, she does her shop, buys her card, then she walks along the high street a little bit, sees a bench, sits down for half an hour, has a coffee, chats to someone, gets up, goes to the next shop, comes out, sits on another bench. So benches make these areas more accessible to vulnerable groups of people. Bike racks mean that people don't have to pay for public transport, means that they're not going to pay for parking, it means that they can cycle, they can get exercise, they can be healthier. Pedestrianised streets make it feel safer for families. Having street entertainers, pop-up shops, markets means that it's more of a day out. So again, that can attract families, it can attract students, young people, because it means that you're not just going shopping, it means that you're going to go out and you're going to have an experience, you're going to see and do different things, okay? So there are a range of things that different local councils can do to make their retail areas more encouraging. So we're going to further this a little bit more. So what we've got here is this exact same image, okay? Now you're not going to have a go at writing this 8-mark question, but I just want you to have a look at it and have a think about it. So the question is, analyse the ways that Lancaster is encouraging more people to shop in the town centre. Use evidence from this photo. So what I would like you to do in your books is just have a look at this photo. And you can see that they've already picked out 4 things, but thinking about other stuff that we've just spoken about, what else can you infer about this area? So maybe do a couple of bullet points of what other things can you pick out from this shopping environment that make it attractive to people? And then I'd maybe like you to have a go at kind of explaining it. So making that point, so saying, from this photo, I can see that there are cycle racks. So I've made a point. I've also provided some evidence because I've said I can see cycle racks in the front of the image. Then make an inference. So this means that people are more encouraged to be active, which leads to a healthier, fitter society. So I've then explained that chain with a chain of reasoning. I've elaborated and explained it. So maybe pick out a couple of things from here and just have a go at expanding, at snowballing, at checking in on it, okay? So pause your phones, just pick a couple and have a think. What points, if you were answering this 8-mark question, what points might you pick out and how might you elaborate them, all right? Okay, well done. We've got to the end of our next lesson. So what you have got should have in your book by the end of this lesson is a description and explanation of vacancy rates, calculation of the percentage of vacancy rates, the death of the high street Gapville, reasons for death of the high street diamond 5, not 6, sorry I can't count, the effects of death of the high street, and then ways to improve the high street. If you haven't got all this stuff in your book, go back and have a look through it. I'm also going to quickly explain to you how next lessons can work, because I'm not doing a video for lesson number 4 of the retail topic because it's a waste of my time. Because what you're going to be doing for your 4th lesson, when your teacher next sends it to you, so you don't do it now, is you are going to be logging on to Teams and you are going to be watching a documentary. There's an hour-long documentary about Death of the High Street. And what you will get at the start of that lesson is your teacher will send you a PowerPoint which has got a list of questions. You need to write those questions into your books, and then as you're watching the documentary, you need to write the answers in. There's no point in me doing a video telling you to do that, so you're not going to get a video for next lesson, but you will be sent a PowerPoint which you need to follow the instructions on very, very carefully, all right? Well done, Year 9. Hopefully you are all doing well, and I hopefully will see you all very, very soon. Goodbye.